Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we're tackling, well, a pretty heavyweight thinker.
Oh.
We've got a stack of sources here on Martin Heidegger.
Definitely influential and, yeah, often seen as challenging, but the ideas are powerful.
Absolutely. And the sources you sent over really give us a path into his key concepts, especially from his big work, Being and Time, but also touching on some later stuff too.
Right. It's all about trying to get at the core of his thought.
So our mission today is to unpack those key pillars for you. We're talking about that fundamental difference he sees between being itself and, actual things.
It's an ontological difference, yeah.
And then there's his unique take on human existence, Dasein, he calls it.
Mm-hmm. And how that relates to our awareness of our own ending, our finitude.
Exactly. The whole being towards death idea. It sounds grim, but it's actually central to his philosophy of living authentically.
It really is. It's about getting past the jargon to the insights that might actually make you think differently about, well, everything.
Okay, let's dive in and see what we can pull from these texts. Right, so let's start with that first really big distinction Heidegger makes. He says it's something Western philosophy basically skipped over for centuries.
He does. It's this difference between being Dasein and beings, das Seinde. So beings are just things, anything that exists. A table, a rock, you, me.
Okay, simple enough so far.
But being sign isn't just another one of those things, not even the biggest or most general one. According to the sources, it's more like the underlying condition. It's what determines what it even means for any of those beings to be in the first place.
So it's not a thing,
Yeah.
but the isness that lets things show up as things.
That's a good way to put it. It's the fundamental ground. And he calls this distinction the ontological difference. It's crucial for him.
And why does he think philosophy forgot this?
Well, the sources suggest he felt that thinkers from Aristotle on basically reduced the question of being to questions about beings. They'd ask, what is this substance? Or define being in terms of, say, constant presence, something unchanging.
Instead of asking, what does is even mean?
Exactly. They focused on the entities and missed the underlying question of being itself.
Now, the sources mention something else, particularly from his later work. Being. With a Y. Seen.
Ah, yes. Later Heidegger gets even more, let's say, intricate. The sources describe seeing or being as maybe a more primordial sense of being. It's linked to this concept of erigness,
Which means?
the appropriating event. It's kind of the dynamic happening, the event through which the meaning of being gets determined for a particular historical time or epoch. It's how being and humanity sort of belong together and shape each other. It's less static, more about historical unfolding.
Okay. So being isn't fixed. It sort of happens.
In a way, yes, especially in his later thought. And this idea of things showing up, appearing meaningfully, leads us straight to language.
Ah, the famous language is the house of being. I remember reading that.
It's a key phrase. One source even quotes him directly. Only where the word for the thing has been found is the thing a thing. Only thus is it.
Wow. That's quite a statement. It's not just that words label things.
No, it's deeper. For Heidegger, it seems language is what opens up the very possibility for things to appear as what they are, to be understood by us within a world of meaning. It structures our experience.
This sounds like that S structure the sources mentioned. We see something as a tool or as a threat or as beautiful.
Precisely. Language provides that structure. It doesn't physically create the object, obviously, but it shapes how it shows up for us meaningfully within our world.
Okay, so if being is this fundamental condition
Yeah.
and language helps reveal it, where do humans fit into all this?
Yeah.
That brings us to Dasein, right?
Exactly. Dasein literally translates to being there. And this is Heidegger's specific term for the way humans exist.
Not just human being.
Yeah.
Why the special term?
Because the sources emphasize Dasein isn't just another being, another entity in the world, like a chair or a tree. Dasein is the unique site, the clearing, where the question of being can arise, where being itself can show up and be understood.
So our existence is special because it's through us that being gets revealed.
That's the core idea. There's this belonging together of being and Dasein. Our way of being is somehow integral to the happening of being in the world.
And this is tied to his idea of being in the world.
Yes, but we need to be careful there. The sources clarify it's not about having a subjective picture of the world inside our heads. It's more fundamental.
How so?
It's the wherein, the context, the whole network of relationships and meanings that makes up the world we inhabit. Think of maybe the world of a musician or the world of a family.
Ah, okay. So it's the meaningful context that shapes how we encounter everything.
Right. And living within a specific world with its established meanings is what allows us to encounter things as something specific, like encountering certain people as family within a familial world. It connects back to that as structure and language.
And he contrasts this human way of being in the world with animals and objects.
Starkly, the sources mention animals are described as poor in world. Stones are worldless.
Poor in world. What does that mean?
Well, the idea is that an animal is sort of captivated by its environment, driven by instinct within what Heidegger calls a disinhibiting ring. It reacts, it behaves, but it doesn't grasp things as things in the way we do. It doesn't have that open relationship to beings.
And a stone is just there.
Just present at hand, has no world, no relationship to things. Dasein, on the other hand, is world-forming. We have this capacity for what he calls comportment, actively engaging with beings, understanding them as beings, letting them be. This involves a kind of restraint and self-awareness that animals lack.
That makes sense. It's about that reflective distance, the ability to see something as something.
Exactly. And this capacity is tied to selfhood. It's fundamentally different.
The sources also mention that even doing philosophy is seen by Heidegger as
a fundamental way of Dasein, yeah. Not just a job or a hobby, but a way of existing that actually allows Dasein to fulfill its potential, to question its own being.
Interesting. Okay, let's shift to what might be the most, well, existentially charged part of this. Dasein as being towards death.
This one hits home for obvious reasons, but again, it's not just saying we all die eventually.
Right. The sources stress it's about the possibility of death being part of our existence now.
Yes. It's always before us. Our own non-being is a constant possibility that shapes how we are right now. It's not just a future event, it's a structural feature of Dasein.
And facing this finitude, truly facing it, is supposed to be transformative.
Hugely transformative. The sources say it individualizes down to itself. Confronting my own death, the end of my possibilities, forces me to see my life from a unique, non-transferable perspective. No one else can die my death.
And this confrontation brings out a specific feeling or mood.
Yes, the fundamental response is sorge. It's tricky to translate care, concern, worry, solicitude. It's this underlying structure of Dasein's engagement with the world and itself.
And this sorge, this care, is deeply tied to time, isn't it?
Absolutely. The sources lay this out clearly. Sorge has temporal dimensions. We project ourselves into the future, towards our possibilities, but ultimately towards our end, which can bring angst, anxiety about nothingness.
Okay, so that's the future aspect.
Then there's the past. We are thrown into existence, we didn't choose it, and we carry the weight of what we have or haven't done. One source mentions this confronting of the past can involve a sense of guilt, maybe not moral guilt, but the sense of falling short of our possibilities.
In the present.
In the present, through this lens of care, we are constantly dealing with the things around us, but perhaps also realizing we haven't fully grasped our potential for freedom and authenticity now.
So death ends our future possibilities, but the sources say it doesn't exhaust all possibilities.
Right, and marks the end of this particular Dasein's potentiality for being. It closes off my projects.
And it's this confrontation with the end that really opens the door to living authentically.
That's the connection Heidegger makes. The sources contrast authentic temporality with the everyday, inauthentic kind.
How does that work?
Authentic temporality involves anticipation, specifically, anticipating one's own death, not with fear, but with resolve, as your own most possibility. It involves repetition, resolutely taking up possibilities handed down from the past. And it involves the moment of vision, acting decisively in the present situation based on this understanding.
And the inauthentic way.
That's characterized by just awaiting what comes next, forgetting our thrownness or trying to escape it, and just making present, focusing on the immediate task or distraction without that deeper temporal awareness. It's getting lost in the they-self.
The sources say everydayness dilutes the urgency of our own existence.
Yeah, it makes everything seem mundane, repeatable, just another tick of the clock. It obscures the unique, this onceness, the irreplaceability of our own primordial time. Even boredom, one source suggests, can be a sign of this underlying temporal structure showing through the cracks of everyday life.
So time isn't just a container, it's everything.
Pretty much. For Heidegger, temporality is the ultimate horizon for understanding being itself. And the sources show his thinking developed here, moving from Dasein's temporality to thinking about being itself having a history, occurring
The
temporally.
history of being.
Right. The idea that the meaning of being isn't static, but has unfolded differently in various epochs of Western thought, maybe focused on substance in one era, will to power in another. And crucially, each revealing also involves a concealing.
A concealment.
Yes, a withdrawal. Understanding this history means paying attention to how being also holds itself back, which the sources relate to destiny or epic, a kind of withholding inherent in how being gives itself.
And this brings us back to Eregnus, that appropriating event.
Exactly. The sources connect Eregnus to this historical unfolding, this belonging together of being and time, being and human being. It's the dynamic through which being gives itself in a certain way for an epoch.
And for our time, the technological age.
The sources mention Gestel, or inframing, as a preliminary form of Eregnus. It's the dominant way being shows up now, where everything, including us, tends to be seen as a resource, something to be ordered, optimized, put on call, a standing reserve.
It sounds pretty bleak.
It's a critical diagnosis, for sure.
Yeah.
It's presented as how being reveals itself now, which simultaneously conceals other ways of relating to the world. And it's tied to how we, as humans, are engaged in this technological mode of revealing.
It's interesting to see how his own life, as presented in the sources, had this major shift too, starting so deeply religious.
Yeah, Catholic background, aiming for the priesthood, focused on eternity, then a break. The sources point to influences like Husserl's phenomenology, Neo-Kantianism, a move into philosophy, grappling with time, history, finitude. Quite a journey.
Which brings us finally to the really difficult part. The sources are clear. We have to address his involvement with National Socialism.
Yes, and they frame it as a complex and intensely debated ethical and political issue. The information provided outlines his time as rector at Freiburg University in 1933-34, his initial support for the movement.
His resignation, his later claims of being persecuted by the Nazis, and his, well, very noticeable public silence, especially regarding the Holocaust.
Right. The sources mention his apparent belief, at least initially, that the Nazi movement represented some kind of national renewal linked to his philosophical ideas about historicity and destiny, a potential he later felt was betrayed.
There are accounts mentioned, like from Karl Loeff, suggesting he still held some belief in its core idea even after stepping down as rector.
The sources state he did remain a party member for a while after resigning, but also describe him gradually pulling back from active politics, perhaps seeing philosophy as a more fundamental path. They also note the findings of a post-war denazification committee,
which apparently concluded he hadn't actively promoted Nazi ideology after 1934, resulting in a relatively lenient outcome, though still imposing teaching restrictions for a time.
It's presented in the sources as a deeply troubling aspect of his biography, and, as you said, the subject of ongoing fierce debate. We're just relaying the information presented in the texts we reviewed without taking any particular stance ourselves.
Absolutely. Okay, wow. We covered a lot of ground there, from the beings not beings distinction through Dasein's unique existence to being towards death and authenticity.
And seeing how language, time, care, source, and world all weave together in his thought. It's dense but incredibly thought-provoking stuff.
It really is. Even grappling with it at this level forces you to question some fundamental assumptions about what it means to be here, what time really is, how we relate to everything.
It pushes you beyond just seeing existence as one more property, like red or heavy. It asks us about the meaning of is itself.
So bringing this all back to you, the listener, maybe reflecting on your own life, your own concerns. Well, what's the takeaway?
Well, consider this thought drawn from the implications in the sources. If Heidegger is right that our being is fundamentally shaped by our finitude, by this being towards death,
and if our everyday way of living tends to cover that up, making everything seem ordinary, just one day after another,
how might genuinely confronting the unique, unrepeatable this-onceness of your own limited time change how you perceive your possibilities and maybe how you choose to act right here, right now?
Definitely something profound to reflect on as you navigate your own being in the world.